The Indiana Jones series to date. You know, this is this has been a fun series to play. And with a new game apparently coming out at some point in 2024, the year's not over yet at the time of this recording, so it's still possible. Uh, it's growing after a long hiatus. Now, it is based off the film franchise and ties in very nicely with the first three movies. Now, I say this because at the time that this one came out, or that the last game in the franchise came out, it wasn't fully released. I don't think the fourth movie had been released yet. I'm, I'd have to double check. So let's see. Yeah, the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull had not been released yet. So, where does this put us? Well, I'll be honest. The games came out in a set order, and I played them through in the order they were released. But ironically, uh, the fourth game released, which is Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb, is actually set before all the other games. You see, the first game that was released was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Now, since it was made by LucasArts, which is actually linked to Luke and LucasArts, Lucasfilm, this was a direct make of the game. This was a direct make of the movie. Of course, it is combined with the Scum engine, which was LucasArts' tool. It basically stood for script creator utility for Maniac Mansion. Well, this meant that you had to select, verbs and then select items on screen or items in your inventory to make commands to work the game and advance. The same, which was a very good mechanic for the LucasArts games. A mechanic that would get shared and done multiple times years down the line. But with The Last Crusade, the movie, well, for the game, you could handle things in various different ways. But it actually plays out with the story of the movie, which is basically Indiana Jones has been called on to find the Holy Grail, something that his father had been specializing in. And when Indy mentions his father, he is told that actually it was your father that we hired before who's gone missing. Of course, it is revealed as the game plays out that things are in London. That the someone else is searching for the Grail. They've ransacked Indy's father's home. So what we find out, the Germans of World War II are seeking the Grail, obviously for Hitler. So Indy is now trying to find his father, rescue his father, and also find the Grail so Hitler can't get it. Of course, as they are doing all this, we discover that it was actually Hitler's people that hired them in the first place. So Indy must rescue his father, they must escape, they must beat them down there, and when they fail to do that, they must figure a way to prevent them from getting the Grail. And it plays out basically similar to the movie, except you can actually change minute little things. Of course, the good ending is the ending of it is that you are indeed successful. In one, discovering the Grail. Two, making sure the Germans don't get it. And three, making sure it's never found again. This is the shortest of all these games, because at the time it was made, most computers were either running on 5 1/4 floppy disks or 3 1/2 hard disks. Hard drives, saving stuff on there, hadn't really been around yet. Now, after that, and with the success of it, they decided to release Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. This is actually viewed as one of, a lot of fans would consider it the true fourth Indiana Jones movie. Well, the Germans are now after something in Atlantis, a power source, and a god making machine, which you find out. Now, there is someone who Indiana can call on to get help regarding this. A former interest or help in this named Sophia. I believe it's Sophia Hapgood, I believe. I'm trying to remember her name. It's just eluding me right now, which is a shame because it is a. And to really get into things, it is a vast franchise. But let's see here. Her name, yeah, it was Sophia Hapgood. I had to look it up. Now, she was she left archaeology to work on the whole psychic front. Now, whether she is quote a true psychic or not, it's questioned. But she has apparently gained contact with a spirit named Nur Absal. He was apparently an Atlantean king. Now, we have a mission where Sophie, trying to get everything you need to one, access Atlantis, and try and beat the Germans to it. And, of course, this yo-yos back and forth between getting a lead on them or getting ahead of them, or, you know, they get the jump on you. Now, of course, as you get into Atlanta, first you gotta search for the stones that will help you get in, which are held by three different individuals, apparently. Then, once you get into Atlantis, you must get through the gates of Atlantis, which requires a lot of planning and figuring out puzzles. Of course, along the way, you will have Sophia being in there with you. How depends on how you play the game, of course. Of course, the closer you get to the heart of Atlantis, Sophia comes under possession. And also, if you choose to free her or not is another thing that plays things. Of course, the proper ending does have you free her. In the end, you find your way through Atlantis. You find your way down to the great machine, which will create gods. Of course, you have to be careful of how you do things. And as it plays out, well, let's face it, you have to trick the geek so-called master race into, you know, doing stupid stuff. This allows the machine to go kerblooey, thus resinking Atlantis. It sort of surfaces when you activate the machine, as well as prevents the Germans from exercising a very powerful fuel source and being able to turn the tide of the war to their favor. Now, after this, we have another adventure where Sophia plays a part. And this was Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine. Now, ironically enough, apparently there were two versions of that one that were released. One for PC and on the Nintendo 64, and one that was released on the Game Boy Color. Obviously, that one was in 2D. Now, this one is set in 1947, well after World War II. Well, about 2 years after the end of World War II. So there's no longer the Germans to worry about. However, we now have to worry about the Russians. You see, The Russians have found out about the infernal machine. So the CIA, now having Sophia Hapgood working for them, call in Indiana Jones to help them get a jump on what the Russians are after. And that is, of course, the infernal machine. Why? Is it obviously a power source that they want to exploit? Maybe contact or something else? With some extra dimensional identities? Well, this is what you find out. However, in the time of the Babylonians, when they actually had created this thing and worshipped a being called Marduk, they took the pieces of the machine and had them sent out into the world, fearing what would happen should the wrong people get a hold of it, or these beings get, or possibly maybe that these beings might do something bad to their world. And so Indy embarks on an adventure to find all the items, all the parts of the infernal machine. Now, this takes him all over. Takes him to Russia to find one piece. Takes him inside an ancient temple with a volcanic creature in it for a second piece. Takes him to a Polynesian area to find a third, well, no, not a Polynesian, an Aztec area, or an Incan area, one of the two. It's Aztec, to claim another piece. And each of the pieces has a unique power. The first one you find, you can cause explosions or quakes, good for shattering certain rocks. Or an ice creature. The second one allows you to become invisible, so you can sneak by certain things. A third one allows you to levitate, which, to be honest, Indy could use when he's dealing with giant snake. We know how he hates snakes. Now, after getting the third item, he gets captured by the Russians and then has to escape. Regathering the items in the process. Once he does this, he heads off to Egypt, into an Egyptian temple where there is an ancient robotic machine, which the part he finds there will help power things up to help defeat it. And then we learn who the real treacherous one is. It wasn't the Russians, it was the CIA. Of course, once he gathers the pieces together, obviously the CIA man has gone nutso loco. I mean, he pushes Sophia into the device to, you know, act as a conduit, but he's gone mad with the power. And he's also put everything in the wrong spots. So Indy has to go around, put those right, follow Sophia into the realm where Marduk is. He has to fight Marduk, which ironically also uses he has to charge up his whip once that in this realm and use that to defeat Marduk. Of course, Marduk then possesses Sophia, so he must fight her, to possess Sophia and to free her, and they escape. With, lo and behold, escaping this alternate world, getting out of the temple or structure where it is. Of course, we meet our who we thought was our antagonist, a Russian archaeologist, who is very, very. He's not what you think. He actually says God's extra dimensional entities, be what it may. As for this Cold War, who knows how it's going to play out? It'll take years to sort it all out, anyhow. He wasn't in it for the power, he was in it for the discovery. And he obviously wasn't about in it for using that discovery either. He was very down to earth. In the end, and he's like, at the end of that adventure, you know, I could go with some of that socialist vodka right now. Indeed, what looks like the start of a friendship there. Kind of the best ending I've seen in a Indiana Jones game. So it was quite the feat to also realize that the fourth game was set before any of those. In fact, it is set before the Temple of Doom. And that's the Emperor's Tomb. Now, you got to. Now, this was also a change in things. Because it was set literally after. Well, it was set before, and it's called the Emperor's Tomb. Which, with this game, with Indiana Jones, you have to go with very unique temples, locations, all throughout the franchise. And one of the more modern day things to go after is the Emperor's Tomb. This fabled mausoleum in China. No one has been inside. There's reasons due to report of what's in there. I mean, according to the story, there's a lake, like a lake or a moat of liquid mercury in there, which is highly toxic. Well, as we go in there, well, it opens actually with Indy in a British jungle area seeking out an idol, one that, again, the Germans are after. If you find that hard to believe, let's be honest here. The Indiana Jones franchise, there was a history of the Germans being very into, the occult. So obviously, they're going to do what they can. get to get to get anything. Now, as Indy is, of course, it opens with Indy, and that area he's in is like British Galen, where he's making his way through a jungle, through old ruins, uh, dealing with smugglers and German soldiers, seeking an idol. Of course, the main German foe in this one is a Albrecht von Beck. Yes, I will call him von Beck. Of course, after he gets the idol and Lex gets attacked by an albino crocodile, he returns to New York, and official Chinese marshal and his assistant come in, informing Jones of the heart of the dragon, a black pearl buried with the first emperor of China. Apparently, it grants magical power, and the Marshal Kai wants Jones to retrieve it before it falls into the wrong hands. They also show that the idol that he had claimed has one of the pieces of the Mirror of Dreams, which is an artifact that would help navigate the tomb. Of course, knowing that the Germans are looking for this stuff too, he heads to Prague to get the second piece, and it's full of Gestapo agents and such. And after solving puzzles and battling either a homunculus or someone who was tested on, uh, he obtains the second piece and then gets knocked out by von Beck, who has survived his encounter with the crocodile. He's scarred. And he takes the two pieces and has his subordinates transport Jones to Istanbul, where they intend to interrogate him. Jones wakes up in Istanbul. Mei Ying comes in, rescues him, surprising Jones that there's something more going, and telling Jones that this word inwardly tells him something else is going on. But underneath is a sunken city with the third piece of the mirror. So Indy makes his way in there, works his way in, avoiding more Gestapo men, German agents, and sharks, and then has to fight a kraken to gain the last piece. And when he defeats the beast, he meets up with Mei Ying, and she tells him that Kai is actually the leader of the Black Dragon Triad. It is the most powerful crime organization in China. See, he had formed an alliance with the Germans to find the heart of the dragon, but when Indy unwittingly secured the first piece, he decided to betray them, the Germans, in order to get the heart for himself. So now Mei Ying teams up with Jones so they can stop him, but they're unaware that the Marshal has his people listening. This leads to a run through British Hong Kong, where they find out that Kai was onto them and has Mei Ying captured. Also, they were supposed to wait for Indy's associate named Wuhan, who meets them there, and they chase the kidnappers down to the dock with a rickshaw. Fighting scores of gangsters along the way. Of course, now the Germans take her to Kai's island, private island. So they follow, and Indy has to storm the place. This is, of course, done by infiltrating a submarine base, finding out that Von Beck and Kai are arguing about their deal, reaching an agreement. Basically, here's how it's going to work, they say. Kai says, this is how it's going to work. I'll give you the pearl after I get control of China. So Indy must, of course, disguise himself, sneak into the base, use the base to then access Kai's fortress, which is a pagoda, and of course make his way up to rescue Mei Ying. Of course, just as he gets there, he gets dropped into catacombs underneath with undead soldiers, spirit-possessed soldiers. Indy has to gets a weapon, a boomerang-like weapon, which is the Pei Ching, or it means the dragon's claw. Of course, now Indy must use this to, one, free Mei Ying from being possessed, and they then head with the mirror to the tomb, where he must use this mirror to cross various traps that can't be seen, some that can be seen, but some can't, in the efforts to get through, and then fighting various more spirit possessing people type stuff. They end up getting separated. We run across Von Beck again, who chases Indy with a boring machine, and of course, Von Beck falls into a chasm, and Indy enters the netherworld. So Indy has to cross goes through the netherworld, which seems like a version of the Great Wall of China for some reason. He finds the crypt and finds the Emperor's crypt, and basically the Emperor gets awakened, but is instantly killed by the souls of his victims. And Indy is unable to control the power of the heart. He collapses, and Kai grabs it. Now, Mei Ying appears to help Indy, but is now shortly seized by Kai and his new powers. So now he can also create a shield to protect himself and summon a dragon to battle him. But of course, Jones has this mystical MacGuffin that he has to power up to stop Kai, which is then successful. And of course, the victims rise and mistake Kai for the first emperor, and of course kills him. And especially as Kai is devoured by the dragon, and what's left of him, and they get out of the netherworld, returning to Hong Kong. And we have they get to have basically have a little romantic fun time before we get into the events that lead to Temple of Doom. You know, I have to say this for these games. Some of them were a treat to play, some of them were a pain to play. I mean, the games, the first two were very faithful. Of course, they were pure LucasArts, so they were very faithful to the point and click system, as was the time for the day. The third game brought a more action element to things, as if you want to look at it this way, this was what was intended. And was the same thing that was, since like Core could not get the Indiana Jones license, they switched it to Lara Croft there. So the third game and fourth game have these reminiscent of you know Tomb Raider and later Tomb Raider games. And it was more action, but there was also still puzzles. I mean, you have to find the right thing to progress in each of these games. It's remarkable. And of course, now so your first two games were point and click. Your next two games were more action. But here's an odd thing that I noticed looking back at them. The first three games had the ability to save, and you could save at any point in the game, and if you messed up, you could bring back that exact moment or where you last saved. Kind of good when you've got these treacherous jumps you have to make and possible big falls. But the fourth game, Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb, didn't have this ability. You only had, quote, checkpoints. After you got through with a certain section, that's where you moved on. Which could be a pain in the butt because, of course, as you get through a section that has a lot of difficulties, there's the thought that I'd like to save right here, but I can't. Because if I restore, it'll just shoot me back to the start. Trust me, I raged a few times. Of course, I went in not knowing what I was going into. Now, it did still have the puzzles. Sometimes they weren't necessarily obvious. And of course, you had hidden items you could find too in these last two games. Something to add for the explorer, I would say. Now, of course, with those later two games, you also had to watch Indy's health. Well, you actually had to watch his health in the other games as well, depending on the path you took. You see, that's where the first two games had a benefit. You could play those either, quote, using your brains or using your fists or using your wits. But in the process, you had to remember what you used to get past certain people. Because that is the case. You have to be careful. But this also led to different ways of playing the game and trying to beat the game. As to the replay value. The latter games didn't have that. It was more straightforward. So you have to have some sort of explorer aspect, more health wise. I mean, let's face it, while you could find stuff to heal yourself in the first game if you got knocked out with fisticuffs, you were sort of stymied. I mean, it's realistic because you go into the fight with reduced health. But another thing is that with the setting of these games, the first, second, and fourth set pretty much before the end of World War II, your major enemy was Germans. The third game, your enemy starts out appearing to be the Russians, but then turns into the CIA. Which is very nice, and even the Russians don't necessarily. The one person you come across, he's not necessarily all that bad when you think about it. He's more the intellectual. He's not in for power. He's in to learn the truth. Now, this works in well with how things play out. I mean, when you have a game based off a movie or a movie franchise, you're dealing with a story people know. So they know how it's supposed to play out. And then you add original stories. Of course, considering the source of some of these stories, you can even declare them as canon. But when you have something where you have taking place over different time spans, or in a set time span, you have to figure things out that way. And of course, with the first two games being very, closely linked with the source material, or to the creator of the source material, so to speak, it's pretty safe to say that they are pretty much true. And of course, when you get to original stuff, you have to, run with it. And it's always tricky when you have something set before other stuff. Especially when you consider that the games would, quote, work in well with the movies. And so you have to keep that in perspective. I mean, you can't necessarily have Indy going after the Sacred Stones and Temple of Doom. At the same time, he's going after something like the Mirror of Dreams, or Mirror of Dreams when he's supposed to be going after the Lost Ark. Now, when things were said and done, it's a good series. Now, What does the next adventure mean? To be honest, I don't know. It's obviously going to come out later this year. And it's called Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. And how does this also fit in with the Dial of Destiny, which was the fifth movie? Although, let's face it, we're not entirely sure where that one's going to stand. Because once you get stuff that was released after the movies, or after the games were released, you are basically dealing with stuff that's outside. Of course, though, this one is working with various things. But I'm not sure how things will play out with it, or how it affects the timeline. But that is how it is. Now, I do know that Bethesda is working on this Great Circle game. And it's mostly going to be first person. Although it is set to, you know, but, now I just see something else, which worries me, because of when it's set. Wonder. I mean, Temple of Doom is supposed to be set before. It's supposed to be set before the Last Crusade. 26, so that's 38, 1938. Or 39 could be, you know, decisive there. Oh, yeah. But yeah. So it's going to be quite, it's going to be interesting how all this plays together with this new game. Do I think it's going to be okay? Apparently set in 1937, which would then put it, yeah, between all those. So we will see how things play out. I'm actually curious and interested in getting this, and hopefully I can. But that's all I'm going to say about the franchise to date as it is. I hope you've enjoyed this, and hope you've also enjoyed seeing the images because, well, I'm not sure how they're going to, I hadn't decided at the time of this recording how they're going to look. I would say if I would have to choose, put them in order of enjoyment, well, obviously I'm going to put the first two very high on that list. As where I put 3 and 4, I don't know, I think I enjoyed 4 a little bit better than 3. That could have all just been a sign of the times. But we will see what happens when the next one comes out. Until then, I hope you enjoyed all this, and I hope you take care and have fun. Bye all.